Hello and welcome to our weekly Parsha here with commentary of the Alshich. This week's Parsha is Metzorah, and it deals with somebody who has leprosy. And the leprosy, of course, that the Torah is talking about is not the leprosy that the medical world knows now. It's a totally different disease, and the disease is caused by generally Lashon Hara. There are other spiritual failures that can manifest themselves in physical conditions, which is called saras, which the rabbis say there are certain things that a person could be physically alive but suffering from, and they could be considered as though they're dead. And one of them is if you have saras. That's what we're going to be looking at in this week's Parsha. Just to lead you into this, I was just looking at my YouTube channel where I was putting up a little video last night, which you may already have seen, or rather yesterday that already have seen, for Pesach. And when I was doing that, I noticed a video from my very dear and esteemed friend, Rabbi Professor Dr. David Gottlieb. And it was a question and answer session. And as he is an absolute treasure of the generation, and everything he has to say is well worth scooping in, then I wanted to hear what he had to say in various questions that the Bochrim and Yeshivas Har Sameach were asking him. And the first question which he dealt with, or which was posed to him, was, to me, a very intriguing question. The question was, if you don't intend, said one of the Bochrim, to ever become a rabbi, ever become a rebbe teaching in a yeshiva, then why do you have to learn how to learn, which is, of course, a very difficult thing to struggle and tackle the Gemara's arguments and master those arguments and master a new language, Aramaic. Why do that? Why not just rest on the art scroll? Just rely on the art scroll to the English, of course, to be able to help you. And so he had four answers chiefly to give, and I think I'd like to focus on two of them. I thought they were, well, I liked them very much, and it's going to sound a bit modest, two of the ones I would give as well. But he answered, of course, very brilliantly, being Rabbi Gottlieb, whereas I wouldn't answer brilliantly. But anyways, the first thing is the Gemara is not a Shulchan Aruch. When it was written, why do we write it in that way? Why not write a Shulchan Aruch? Why not write a Mishnah Torah of the Rambam? What's his point? And the answer is that it's not just about what you should do. The Talmud is teaching you how to think. And I would add to that, how to think the way that Hashem wants a Jew to learn to think. That was the first point Rabbi Gottlieb made. The second was, quick look, and remember, he was talking to Bochrim in Yeshivas Har Sameach, so generally Bali Tshuva. And he said a very interesting thing. He said, it was really quite, he said it very nicely and very cleverly, but he confronted them with a reality which indeed is challenging for somebody starting on the journey of embracing Torah and mitzvahs. And he said, one day you're going to be leaving this place to enter the real world. And then he made a joke, in actual fact, this is the real world and that's not. There was a very profound thought in that little joke. However, in leaving the walls of the Beis HaMedrash, the walls of the yeshiva, costly Beis HaMedrash, and entering normal Jewish communal life where you'll get married and you'll join a community and hopefully have a house, etc., then you will find that to be a participant in a community, you are expected to be able to participate. And it's not an active, conscious decision. It's just everybody assumes that everybody has the same learning level, the same background. They think the same. They get the illusions, the Talmudic illusions that people commonly use in language. And if you've never mastered those skills and never familiarized yourself with those totems of Talmudic religious, I should just say, religious expression, religious thought, then you'll soon find yourself becoming dismissed and perhaps discounted within the community you want to become a member of, because you can't keep up with the guys. A particularly telling point Rabbi Gottlieb made was, and as often people from a place like Har Sameach in particular will go on to get advanced degrees and probably good careers, and maybe have kudos and prestige as a doctor, as an accountant, as a dentist, or whatever, then they find themselves in their Orthodox life, their religious Jewish life, they thrust the ikar of their existence being somebody who is discounted. That's a very uncomfortable place to be. So he added that as another reason why you should come to terms and be able to struggle with the Talmud, its Aramaic language, etc., and its arguments. I would, at this point, add another one. And the other one I'd like to add is from, well, maybe I'll read to you from my chavrusa and I. We just finished learning this with the commentary of Rav Matisyahu Solomon, my old mashgiach from Cedar Yeshiva, now the mashgiach of Lakewood. And we've moved on to learn my chavrusa's suggestion, Sefer Mishli, with the commentary of the Vilna Gaon. Now, the definitive, or it seems to be the definitive version of what the Vilna Gaon said on Mishli, it was written down by his Talmidim, and particularly somebody called Menachem Mendel of Shklov. And so he's a very interesting introduction to this, and he explains there how he went about it, how he would go back if he was unsure of something that he remembered or in his notes he had taken from the Vilna Gaon to clarify that everything he had understood was correct. He said the Vilna Gaon would nod his assent if he got it right. And he said he went back several times. So generally, his version of the commentary of the Vilna Gaon is accepted to be the most authentic. But there's something here he says which I think is tremendously interesting, and I think it perfectly interfaces with the Parsha and with the commentary of the Alshich. But let me just carry on our theme about why do you have to learn how to learn? Why not just read it in English? So he says, I want to tell you something which is an immutable truth, which I heard directly from the lips of the Vilna Gaon, his holy lips, myself. He never expressed, he never wrote down or publicized a pshat, an explanation of any particular posuk in Mishli, of course his commentary is on Mishli here, Proverbs, unless he was also fully aware of the soid, the hidden, the secret, the esoteric, the mystical, the Kabbalistic understanding of what the posuk meant too. So even though the Vilna Gaon would not necessarily delve into that, expose the hidden part of the posuk, if you look carefully at his words, there is within them a hint that there is this other, the second tier of the Shlomo HaMelech's message, prophetic message that he is aware of, even if he's not explicitly saying where it is. So I'll read that again. What I heard from his lips clearly. If he didn't know the real, the core, the mystical core, which is clothed, which wears, as it were, the external appearance of simply being a moral and ethical book, which of course Mishli is classic, the classic, arguably, a moral and ethical book of how a Jew should behave, how a Jew should see things, etc. But first of all, he knew, before he put pen to paper, what the hidden message behind those allusions, the moshels, the proverbs of what the book in English is called Proverbs, is all about. And you should see, and you'd be quite clear that what the Vilna Gaon says, or in Shlomo HaMelech's words themselves in Proverbs and Mishli, even though it seems to be straightforward, a straightforward ethical message that, as they say in Lahavdil, you might expect to hear any religious person expounding on, if it's basic human morality. But I did not, the Vilna Gaon saying, that didn't stop me writing them down or missing them out, because in his commentary is woven together these two strands, the strand of the revealed and the strand of the hidden. Okay, seems straightforward. But really, these words are in the use of the allusion to Yaakov's dream where the ladder is going up to heaven and the angels going up and down. He says these words of Shlomo HaMelech are at the first level. It seems straightforward, but really there's a deeper level, and he calls it a ladder going up to heaven. With its head reaching up to the highest heavens. Because a Yom maskil, which anybody who is a maskil, somebody who a person of understanding, would be able to deduce and divine really by a careful reading of what the Vilna Gaon says in his commentary to Mishlei, and Seder Mishlomo HaMelech says in the words of Mishlei. Unless you're not clear about how this whole system works, then you'd be able to see from a careful, precise examination of the words of the psukim what the allusions are seem to be to. They are also to something else and something deeper. These words trigger allusions to other ethical works, other pshat, simple level messages, the straightforward messages, and also the words are triggers and allusions to the same concepts you'll find in esoteric and deep Kabbalistic texts as well, which points you in that direction. So almost every word is almost like it's a road that sort of like splits in two. You can go that direction or the other direction. It says to understand that is to give yourself it's satisfying to the soul. Fine. That, in actual fact, is what the Alshich is going to say exactly on the concept of Metzorah. So let's remind ourselves what Metzorah is talking about. And little art scroll here. I'm not really going to bother too much. There's no huge Alshich, as he normally does, a microscopic analysis of the words, the tense of the words, if it's in the masculine, not the feminine, if it's in the past tense, not the future tense, extra words that shouldn't be there, etc., etc. He's more interested in the allusions that the moshel, the proverb that it seems to be, and the message the proverb is conveying, when it talks about the person who has spoken Lashon Hara and has got saras, and the process by which he will expunge and get rid of that saras. So let me just read to you I'm not even sure if I should do this in Hebrew, because I want to cut to the chase, as they say. Maybe I'll start in Hebrew just to prove that I can do it, and then we'll translate. This is the laws of somebody who's a Metzorah, somebody who has got leprosy. But in the day that he finishes the process of purification, or almost the process of purification from the tsaras, which, as I said before, is caused by generally Lashon Hara, slandering or listen to slander about other Jews. And he says, so the person is brought to the Kohen. So the Kohen is going to examine this blemish, the stain, and generally on his skin, to see whether it is vanished. He takes the fellow outside the camp, is taken outside the camp, and the Kohen looks at that, and if indeed the healing has occurred, the physical blemish no longer is there. But so the person, the Kohen commands the person to take 2 tziporim chayas taharis. Interesting language. 2 tziporim. So what are the 2 tziporim? It's if we say 2 live tziporim, birds which are tohor, which are pure. Right. So now take 2 pure birds, the 8th erev, and take a cedar wood, a piece of cedar wood, shnei talas, and take shnei talas, which is crimson thread. Now, the thread is dyed crimson by apparently a dye from a creepy crawly, from a bug. It's interesting that very often food dye that one eats commercially today, I'm talking about, is usually from crushed beetles. Don't want to put you off your supper, but you get the idea. So you've also got to take crimson thread. So it's thread a thread which has been dyed crimson, dyed red from creepy crawlies, and then hyssop. And hyssop is a leaf which is used in medication that comes from a little bush. Some people, I thought they pronounced it hyssop, but I thought I'd check this before this year. So at least on Google it says hyssop, not maybe an Americanized version, but anyway, it's a bush. And then the Cohen, let's read the rest in English. The Cohen shall command, and one bird will be slaughtered into an earthenware vessel over spring water. As for the live bird, you shall take it with the cedar wood and the crimson thread and the hyssop, and you shall dip them and the live bird into the blood of the bird that was slaughtered over the spring water. And then it goes on, he sprinkles it 7 times upon the person being purified, and that's reading on there to the end of the 9th posuk. That's the end of the process. The person being purified shall immerse his clothing, shave off his hair, immerse himself in the water, and become pure. Thereafter he may enter the camp, but he shall dwell out of the tent for 7 days. That's the process. Now, here's what the Alshich has to say about this. So if I put my marker in place, yes, shows a certain degree of professionalism, often missing. And he says the following thing. Now, this is just an echo of what effectively what we read before from Menachem Mendel's Law of one of the great Talmudim of the Vilna Gaon. Of course, the Alshich predates him and therefore has seniority. In Sophet, there's not the slightest doubt. There is no concept. There's no part of the Torah, no concept of the Torah, no aspect of the Torah, the pratas asher ein boi tzipasidus, and any of it, any aspect of it, which is not, as it were, multifaceted, containing mystical concepts as well. So it's a polysidus aspects which are hidden Kabbalistic ideas. The same as I said before, the Kabbalistic idea is clothed in an appearance of, or a first level, let's say it that way, of ethical and moral ideas, or indeed legal ideas. However, underneath the surface is also a mystical concept going on here as well. Now, if that's true about Mishlei, certainly how much more so is it true about the Chumash itself? There are mystical concepts which are alluded to, and I'll carry on reading the Alshich because he makes some very important points here. Ki haTorah v'hamishpat elokim asher ein rai and yachil moshav to the kavanas b'kol din u'mishpat echad moni elav neprati prata b'aktani. And obviously, if, as it were, the superficial level that you and I can understand, that a human being can understand, is, well, if you forgive me saying what sounds ridiculous, understandable, you must understand there are countless levels below that, or inside that, within that, which are generally beyond that we understand. It's about like those Russian what they call it, Matryoshka dolls. You know, the doll comes out, the smaller doll, and the smaller doll, and the smaller doll inside. And of course, in actual fact, to keep our metaphor correct, in actual fact, strangely, when you open it, you take out the one inside, which is bigger than the first one. It's an upside down, an inverted Matryoshka doll. And of course, within the concept, within the parameters of physics, this is all got to do with time and relative dimension space. But this is an idea that comes up several times in the Torah when space contains more than it should. All the animals in the world get into this really quite small boat or a vessel that Noah was told to build. How could such a thing happen? That physical space, those dimensions cannot contain that amount. And it is because the Torah is not constrained or contained or bound by the laws of physics or the laws of dimension and shape, size and shape. And therefore it can happen. So in this case, the mitzvah, it's not that a Matryoshka doll is smaller and smaller, it's you're actually going deeper and deeper and deeper. It's like a little hole that's going down like a cone, inverted cone. Okay, that's C-O-N-E, not C-O-H-E-N, I hasten to add. So he says, so even though once you, as we take off the first level, and then you see this great depth underneath, and you peer into the vast expanse below. But we are, even though that the doll idea goes on and on and on and on and on, and in fact, infinitely, the Torah being an expression of the knowledge of Hashem's Baruch Hu is infinite, anything that is a fraction of the infinite itself infinite, then obviously the idea is that how could you understand it? If the pshat is what simple the human mind can understand, why are we even looking beyond what the human mind can understand? So he says the Alshich, and it's an idea which Rabbi Dessler echoes in his essay, brilliant essay in Hilly Base on the sin of Odom Arishon, which I promised to put this week and didn't. Erev Pesach's a difficult time, in which he says there is nothing in the Torah which is there merely to tell a narrative, to tell a story about somebody who was there. If it's in the Torah, it's there because it teaches something which has got an application to our life, our realities, our dimension, and our time. And even though to try and fathom, he says, something the Ramban echoes in his commentary on Parshas, to try and fathom, his first commentary on Parshas, by the way, to try and fathom what went on in Ma'aseh Parshas, what Odom Arishon was like, is so infinitely beyond us. But it's not there, it wouldn't be in the Torah unless there's something that we can get out of it, some message. Same idea here, says the Alshich. So having established the idea that Pshat, the elementary, let's call it that, the superficial level of the Torah is general, universal, understandable to anyone who pays attention to it. But if you learn to look carefully, then you will find that there's levels below that and beyond that. You can't see them as the dolls go on expanding infinitely. You'll not be able to look infinitely. However, having said that, you might be able to be allowed by Hashem to have a glimpse of something which will be, to go back to Rabbi Dessler, somehow applicable and somehow inspirational to you, even if we live at a level which is used to seeing myopically and not very far at all. You might be able to extend the range of your vision a little bit. So he says, but the Almighty has allowed us to consider, to use our brains, a having shemetz, to get a sniff, a little suggestion of remes, harumas, al pshat, hamikra, min haba, biyadena, halusha, hakulusha, beyond our fragile and weak levels of understanding. A general explanation repeats really the theme we mentioned before. There's tremendous depth to the Torah. Now, having said that, that would be an answer which I would give to that boy that young man who asked Rabbi Gottlieb, and what is the point of coming to terms to learn? I mean, it's just rely on this. The Alshich says in Parshas Balozka, when it talks about, and I mentioned this about 3 months ago, the Alshich says in Parshas Balozka, when Aaron is told to light the menorah, he's told to ignite the menorah, mul pnei menorah, opposite the menorah. But if you get somebody standing there and the menorah is there, and you light it opposite the menorah, well, there's the menorah. So I'm lighting it opposite the menorah. How can I light it? Unless I got an extremely long arm. But there's two types of opposite. There's that opposite and there's that opposite. If Aaron is aware that there is depth beyond the constraints of this world, that lighting the menorah down here is, if you have the right thoughts, to ignite the menorah, which has a parallel, which has a mirror image of a menorah in Shemayim. To do what you should do down here activates activities in different worlds and different dimensions, then that brings it into a whole new world, a whole new life. It brings you into a whole new world, your actions into a whole new world, and makes it touch other lives beyond that which you would normally understand to exist. If you get it right, if you understand that. And it's the case that the mitzvahs that we're given and are allowed to do have echoes and ramifications, make ripples that travel up and touch other worlds and touch heaven. So you really want to know what those are. You want to be aware of that, young man. If I was sitting there and Rabbi Gottlieb honored me by making my suggestion, you got to realize it's not just about learning laws. This is only a certain level. You're activating and you're becoming part of something that connects worlds by learning Torah itself. That mitzvah itself connects other works too. So, having said that, the Alshich is now going to tackle what is the hint here about the person who is who has had saras, and now he's got to bring these as it were the end of the process, his discharge papers from the process of being a leper. So I'm jumping down, missing a few lines of the Alshich and reading a bit more to you. For those who do have this at home, it's that Alshich there, and it's in page Pei. I'm in the second column in the second paragraph. Here was Inazal, a rabbi's teaching the Gorn Erichin, kind of the Kibbutz call Ashmas Dova Metzorah who al Loshen Hara. So he just says what I think most people know, and I've mentioned now 3 times, that generally the sin of tzaras is caused by speaking Loshen Hara. Loshen Hara is to speak the truth about somebody, but it's a negative truth. To expose that some weakness a person has, some personality defect, and it's something which is generally considered to be negative. Your motivations for doing so, this is going to be critical. This, of course, we're entering into the famous territory of the Chofetz Chaim and his Shmiras Haloshen. But then you are, on some occasions, allowed to speak negatively about somebody if it's for a positive purpose. If somebody wants to go into partnership with your best friend, and you happen to know that this person is a fraud and a fake, then it's not Loshen Hara to tell the person about it. If, however, there is a caveat to that, if you hate the guy, and in telling him, not only are you warning your friend, but you're getting the enjoyment out of having revenge or stopping this fellow because you dislike him, then it becomes Loshen Hara, even if it's for a positive purpose. So this is the idea of speaking Loshen Hara. It's to speak negatively about somebody to damage them or to promote yourself. It's not for an altruistic reason. You're not doing it for a good thing. You're doing it for a bad thing, to advance you or to pull the person down. Okay, so that's what Loshen Hara is caused by. Sorry, what saras is caused by, what leprosy is caused by. And then it says, and this are the laws of Metzorah. So that's the disease. The laws of Metzorah that we're reading about in our Parsha is the treatment, the course of treatment that the person has to go through. So it might be, God forbid, but think of that horrible disease that people don't like to mention. It could be surgery followed by radiotherapy, followed by chemotherapy, etc., and then monitoring. That would be the process for that. Different processes for different diseases. The Metzorah is the process of curing the disease of somebody who's spoken Loshen Hara, to which you say, what? So you're going to stop somebody from speaking Loshen Hara by taking 2 birds and killing one of them and using its blood and sprinkling on the fellow and a piece of red string and hyssop, a little bush. And what on earth are we talking about here? But that's because we're not looking beyond the pshat to the remez. We're not looking beyond the simple, superficial message of the Torah to the deeper message that's trying to convey. And that's what we have to learn to do. And of course, to go back to Rabbi Gottlieb's point, it also teaches you how to think. Let me go back to what the Alshich is saying. Ashava, Tzidik's Baruch La'asas Remes B'Precious V'Haziras Mishpat Yeser Baal Yishuv L'Kaselas Avlosi. And the reason that we're given this strange parade of activities or things that are required in order to finish the process of Metzorah is in order that everybody should be aware of what caused the disease, so they don't fall into the same trap. Now, B'Terches Metzorah. So that you too don't fall into the exact same thing. Good. Because see, the first thing he has to do to purify himself from a terrible physical eruption of skin blemish or skin blemishes, as a consequence, speaking Loshen Hara, Avinu afarachaman ka'abal ben Yitzah, and Hashem is Baruch, who views us like his son and wants to make sure the son is back on the right tracks and doesn't make the same mistake again. He comes to give us some advice how to go about this. And that is, "B'tzivoso oisim yasa dover asher boy lavovo yoven tochachos megula me'ahava misteris." So that's critical. Let's read that again. I went too quickly. B'tzivoso, he commands the fellow, yasa dover, do something, asher boy lavovo yoven, that your heart will understand. At the subconscious, you may even see this. But certainly in digging deep into the symbolism, the message that's being conveyed underneath the superficial, the mystical message, so you understand Magula Mahabas Miseris, that show you, and I love this phrase, it's very exciting. Ball of over Yoving to Chochas Magula Mahabas Miseris. You will come to understand the fact that Hashem has done you a favor, is expressing his love for you by the fact that he's caused this tsaras to break out in your skin because he did something wrong, in order to put it right. In other words, it's a father who sometimes has to give a patch, has to give a little slap on the nice soft round area at the back of the thighs, which won't do too much damage, but certainly let the person know that he's done something wrong. And that's what Hashem is doing here. But you've got to get the message. I mean, if for a father to spank a child, the child hasn't a clue why he's being spanked, is, well, meaningless and probably cruel. But to let him know why he's being spanked, and you put the spank together with the message that it's meant to convey, you'll probably not do it again. That's precisely what's happening here. So far, so good. Deep breath. Now the Alshich quotes the Rambam. Now the Rambam, I'm busy looking this up before, is too long for us to go into great depth, but it's very Aleph and Perek Yud Zayin of Pirkei Avos. Sorry, Mishnah Yud Zayin of Pirkei Avos, when it famously says there's nothing greater in the world than silence. And there's a whole fabulously interesting discussion amongst the various commentators of the tremendous worth that silence brings to a person, and the value it brings to a person. And there's a famous teaching I've spent my whole life amongst the rabbis. I'm no greater thing that, as it were, enhances a person than silence. What's the business of silence? So he quotes the Rambam there. He talks about various aspects of speech, what speech does. Now, the Alshich wants to make a summary of it, contract that, and I'm not going to reverse the process because in taking the 5 types of speech that the Rambam cites and identifies, the Alshich wants to shrink them into 3. And I don't think actually we've lost very much when he's done so, but let me read to you what those 3 are. 3 different types of speech. So, so what are the 3 different types of speech that we all have available to us? And you know who ki hein emes ki ein orach el bechinas dibur Torah mitzvahs. There is no end. There's no end to the amount of time we can spend discussing Torah and discussing mitzvahs. As I said before, the Torah is a chelik elikat mimal. It's an aspect of Hashem's wisdom itself. Therefore, it is infinite. You can spend an infinite amount of time discussing it. To quote Rabbi Gottlieb, you're learning how to think. You're learning how to, as it were, be able to properly socially interact with other Jews, with Klal Yisrael. But you're also able to touch other worlds and activate other worlds, which, quoting from the Alshich, is also something. But remember, in every mitzvah that you do, again quoting the Alshich, he says, we always make the bracha Asher Kiddushana b'mitzvah. So you're making me holy by doing this. I'm changing. There's a metamorphosis that's occurring within me by doing this. I become a better person. So you're going to be growing. You're essentially not the same person after you've done a mitzvah than you were before. You've become a little bit more Asher Kiddushana b'mitzvah, who's maybe a little bit more holy. And all those tiny little bits eventually suddenly add up, and the transformation is complete. I remember of my 7 years in Gateshead Yeshiva, again, it's something I mentioned not too long ago. There were people, next door neighbors across the street, who were just nice, idealistic religious Jews trying to learn as much Torah in yeshiva as possible with a nice smile and a nice little conversation, and good people. Then suddenly you hear that your next door neighbor has been appointed to be a Dayan in a Beis Din in somewhere or other, a Rosh Yeshiva somewhere else. So very, very important and prestigious roles. And you think, wow, how did that happen? Well, the answer is that all those tiny little minutes of learning were impacting on him and changing him to the point that you just carried on looking upon him as your neighbor, but the world looked at him and saw him being a very different person altogether. It's a bit like when a person tries to go on a diet and they step on the scales, they see their weight, it's a problem. They start their diet, a week later they go on the scales, no change. And then the week later, no change. And the change seems to be very small. But someone who hasn't seen for 6 months sees him for the first time, wow, you've lost a lot of weight. I mean, it happens. Small things are very hard to notice. Tiny changes are hard to notice. But there are tiny changes that are going on here as well. And that makes all the difference in the world by learning Torah. So he says the following thing. So types of speech which are good. Learning Torah, that's always good. And you're increasing, you're becoming a different person as a consequence, as we've just mentioned a second ago. Torah mitzvahs. I mean, you can just carry on forever. But there's another type of speech, and that's the speech which is not a social talk, which is very dangerous. The Rambam makes that quite clear and gives examples of why. That's why you should speak very careful how much you speak, because it's when you start to get into conversation, even though you've just finished learning Shmiras Haloshen and you're aware of all the dangers of speech, but the more you speak, the speech itself has got certain seduction to it. You enjoy it. Somebody makes a joke, you make a joke, you make a clever comment. It drags you in to make more comments, and suddenly you find that the care you were taking in speaking to not contravene the laws of Lashon Hara suddenly start to break down. So he says, but when it comes to another type of speech, and that's when you're just dealing with your ordinary daily life. So you're a doctor and you're dealing with somebody's medical issues. You're a businessman. You're whatever it is that you do for your livelihood. Then it can well be the case that it's easy to keep that and as being an aspect of Torah, because you're really focused just on the professional requirements. You are careful not to be, spending too much in the coffee room talking. It focused just on your actual income and your livelihood. It's easy to keep that and make that part of the Torah that you're doing. There's a famous Mishnah about Rabbi Yochanan, a sandler. Now, of course, when you're working for somebody, you're not allowed to think of anything except the job that you're supposed to be doing for him. So he was a cobbler, every single stitch to be the best stitch. And so doing, made a Kiddush Hashem. Each stitch became a mitzvah in its own right. In other words, even though he's just doing his normal daily routine, his normal earning his livelihood, earning his wage, but at the same time, he was making sure that it was a part of the Torah. I'm a Ben Torah who's a cobbler. I'm a Ben Torah who's an accountant, etc. You can make I knew somebody, Mr. Bamberger, in Manchester. He was a businessman, German Jew, descendant of Würzburger Rav Bamberger, and in his own business, which he owned, he had a large business. If he found that he needed a pen, and he found a pen at the desk, he would write out a little piece of paper. I took a pen and hand that in to the in-house accountant, so that it would be taken from his salary or his whatever he earned from the business. So that's a very high level. You can be engaged in mundane matters and still be a Ben Torah. So he says, second type of speech, he says, is when you're doing things that generate the food for your table and the rent for your apartment or the mortgage for your house. So he says, the things that a person has to do in order to generate all the things that you need to live, they can because if you behave in business that you're doing things properly as a Ben Torah should, Hashem considers that also speech which is acceptable, which is effectively Akidush Hashem. But there's a third type of speech. The third type of speech is the dangerous speech, or the one that's downright toxic. So let's say people go to bars, even without the alcohol, very soon the conversation turns to other people, and as the Rambam writes, what sort of house he's built, look at his wall, he spent money on this, he spent money on that. Which classically ends up being, character assassination. Or then descends into, foul language, so very common these days. And that's the third type of speech. And so the Alshich says, so that is the thing. The third one, obviously, is the one that got the person to have tsaras. So why all these strange things of scarlet threads and pieces of wood? What's that got to? How is that doing anything? It sounds totally bizarre. And the answer is, if you know the symbolism, if you look beyond the first level, as we mentioned before, to the deeper level, it teaches you a lesson. As Rabbi Desta says, all of it there is to teach us a lesson. And the lesson isn't that there's some innate, mystical Harry Potter type qualities to pink pieces of thread. But if you know that God wants you to use this, and there's a message behind it, and you look to find what the message is, then it can start to impact you. So let's read what he says. So I'll take my glasses off at this point. So I want to make it quite clear. In what we read at the beginning of our Shir, when we read from the Pesukim at the beginning of Metzorah, all the procedures and all the elements of the procedure you need for the Metzorah to stop being a Metzorah, these are all hints as to deeper levels beneath the surface. Because really we're talking about two types of speech. We said there were two types of speech which were acceptable, positive. And that is the Gihuki Nisha Hamosha Shnesa Gihadibur. Echad Dibur Chai Nefesh Belimit Torah. One, as we said, if you're the Chai Nefesh, you're feeding your soul by speaking Torah. So the speaking that produces the a spiritual nourishment, you're feeding your soul. And there's also and there's also speech which is going to feed the body that you do in business, which you're concentrating simply in business. It's not talking about people and attacking them. And the moshel, they are compared to these two birds. That is to say, when it says, the Gemara says, pit pit and siftruf, who chatter and twitter. Twitter's become a very toxic word these days for a very toxic organization. Pit pit but sipper. The Gemara in Eric and Tessain on base. Perish in Yonim means to say chayes to her, and that will be chayes to hers. It says they are pure birds. Two types of birds, right, are part of the process. Two doves, and the chayes to hers, and they're pure. Kishnehem ba'inin chayes, and they're considered chayes, living. Their speech gives life to the body, life to the soul. Zeh bechinas a nefesh, zeh bechinas a guf. So that's the first thing you have to do. In other words, in taking these two birds, these are birds that speak all the time, twitter, 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 tweet, 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 right? But it's tahar. When is the tweet, 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 and the twitter kosher? When it's feeding the soul, Torah. When it's feeding the body, you're keeping your mind off, people and personal attacks. Fine. But gam shneim taharim, and of course the tahar shehu ki yio zeh v'zeh taharim meshulat p'neo. So they're going to be free of any conversation which contravenes what the Torah has to say and is negative in order to pull somebody down or to artificially push you up. And then he says the following thing: "Begam shneim taharim," he said, "Abel, but dibra suk shlishi." But the third type, the toxic type of conversation, the toxic type of speech, is going to be hinted at by two other things. One is building isopre. So the fun thing, you've got to take an 8 eris, cedar wood. And what's cedar wood? So a cedar is a very, very tall tree. But there's a hint there in the nature of the cedar, and that is there's two aspects, there's two hints, there's two messages being conveyed by the fact that they feature in the process of undoing the damage of the Lashon Hara and the negative thought you've been speaking, words you've been speaking. One is shu eitz bilti oisapri. The first thing is it's not a fruit. It's not a fruit-bearing tree. It bears no fruit. Lo shel tam v'lo shel sherech. And not only does it it doesn't bear any fruit, it doesn't have any smell. It doesn't generate any smell. Often, pine, for example, has got a beautiful smell, but apparently cedar doesn't. Two, the gam, who eats gava, but it's an extremely tall tree, and Rashi already says this in this country. Moshe el dibosh gasas ruach. It's when somebody speaks arrogance, puffing himself up. Making himself good, as we said before. Lashon hara is either to tear somebody down or to blow yourself up, but that's not me. I would never do such a thing. That's hinted at in the fact you have to incorporate that into the process of getting out of this to tell you that was a factor that led you to speak Lashon hara, which caused you tsaras in the first place. Lashon hara v'damela b'hamra s'vasena it's on a mi audain lona. Alkein laman tarchik me'ashliya b'kinis v'mishal elav v'samach alav shnei talat. That's the what caused that. To make sure you don't go back to that, then you've got to use this Hyssop thing, the Hyssop or Hyssop, the little bush. It's a lowly bush. You are high up, now push yourself down. And also you've got to have this string, which is dyed with the wool of creepy crawlies. Is there a hint there? Oh, yes. Repeatedly, it says in Perkyovas, don't forget the day of your death. And the Alshich goes on to say there, it's very interesting. Those who die, this isn't always a gimel, it says, remember where you're going to, a place of dirt or earth, and talea and worms, lice and worms, and that will eat through the flesh. Because I'll say, if you're a tzaddik, then it's just a place of earth. If you are a Rosha, then it's a place where there are worms that are going to eat you up. That is going to be the consequences. You're going to suffer as a consequence. There's much more the Alshich says here, but it's enough to illustrate that there is incredible depth and there's many dimensions of what the Torah has to say. But it's only if you delve deeply into beyond the simple understanding to see where it says, and that has to be in the original language, either in Hebrew or in Aramaic, its close cousin, to see exactly what the Chumash is saying, what the Gemara is saying, because then you access the hint, the other levels that could be applicable to you in your life as well. So again, I would say to that young fellow, to just read it in English, you're just taking one grain of rice from an enormous pot when you could have had enough food to feed you for the rest of your life. I'll look forward to seeing you for next week's, well, not next, I'll try to get in a Pesach share. Gosh, next week's, of course, Pesach. I'll have to have a Pesach share early in the week. I wish you all a very good Shabbos. See you next week.